let's just see what happens. I mean, look, this is the first time I've done it. We're both being guinea pigs in this operation, and we'll just see if it works out for us. But I guess there's no better place to start than here. Welcome to this episode of Small Bike Stuff. This is my first attempt at doing an interview series. I've had a lot of these planned. I've planned them with about 4 or 5 people, and we just never get around to it because everyone's in different countries, as you are. I'm in New Zealand right now, and where are you?
I'm in Australia, out in beautiful, warm Brisbane.
Awesome. And just could you give us a bit of an introduction? So just my introduction is that this is Tom. I've talked about Tom in a previous episode because he sent me a whole bunch of parts. I don't know how to say your last name, so give us the spiel, where you came from, what your name is, how old are you, what you've been up to, and how you've ended up here.
Cool. So my name is Tomasz Kaczmarczyk. It's a Polish surname. The Russians told me, my parents never explained it to me. Apparently it stands for Little Nightmare, Kashmar. My background, in general, I'm just somebody who kind of like enjoys cheap overland travel, just kind of go and see places. My background is I was born in Poland. During the communist times in the Iron Curtain. And my parents moved when I was 2 years old into Germany, where I grew up. That's why I've got that lisp. And once I lived there, my parents, they're kind of, how can I say it, a bit like disappointed Asian father, where I've been like studying like really hard for most of my life as a kid. And at some point, I kind of had enough of that and developed a bit of a feel for kind of like travel and doing some crazy things. I lived in Ireland at some point where I've learned to explore the world, where kind of like people told me about travel and where you can go and what you can do. And they told me about kind of going to Australia. So things kind of developed from there, where at some point I flew to Thailand, licked blood on small motorbikes.
That explains a lot for me. I've only known you from Facebook. I mean, I discovered you from a photo of your bike at some Australian off-road event, festival. I don't know if it was like a camping weekend or what it was. It's solid, well over a year ago now. And there was some photos posted up on a random page, whether it was Postie Bikes Australia or something. I'm not sure what it was. And I just saw a Honda Wave. And as far as I'm aware, I think the photo was taken in Australia and it wasn't just a random photo from Thailand, but the bush kind of looked the same as Thai bush. It's just kind of scraggy and it's got kind of one color and the ground's orange. So I was just like, oh, this is just another guy in Thailand jumping his Honda Wave. That's no big deal. And then lo and behold, you've got a bike in Australia, which in itself is a massive feat because Australia is really not that nice when it comes to vehicle importation, that you've managed to find a way around it. So there's a lot to cover here, but what I want to start at is your first time going to Thailand, because that obviously unlocked the small bike world for you. How old were you when you first set foot there?
I was 24 years old. I kind of lost track of it. 2010, that's when I went there. I went there on a tourist visa. To visit the country as I was flying to Australia on a working holiday to kind of like go live here and by chance kind of live in a camper van. What happened essentially is I went through a bit of a burnout phase from kind of like studying hard and kind of like doing the corporate kind of things to become an established citizen or whatever, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so I went through a bit of a yes man phase. I think some people go through that. And
yeah, we do.
The way how it all came together was a friend of mine just suggested to me, hey, come visit me in Chiang Mai. It's a great place. So I came over there. He picked me up on a Sim something, kind of like Honda Super Cup clone from the airport. It's my first ever experience on a motorbike. I always liked cycling, but like riding motorbikes in Europe is really expensive, so I never got to do that. And that was kind of like great fun going around the mode of Chiang Mai. Then I just like stayed there for a while, and some Australian told me, it's like, hey, you know what, there's like this really cool place. It's called Pai. It's a little hippie village. That's all I needed to know at the time. So I just took a bus over there, arrived in this kind of like little hippie village, just walked around and said, yeah, I've seen the market, I've seen the river, there's some guest houses. What am I supposed to do here? So I asked some people, like, yeah, well, you've got the Grand Canyon, you've got hot springs, you've got like some waterfalls. Like, oh, great, wonderful. How do I go to see them? Well, by motorbike, of course. Oh shit! Okay,
And then the panic ensues.
Right then, so me and with my flip-flops, shorts and t-shirt, I started like walking around to the higher places and just asked around, and they were asking me, it's like, hey, do you have any experience? Of course I said no, the first one. At some point I just said kind of like a little, and somehow they kind of like did let me hire a bike.
Yeah.
And I just kind of got around, explored Pai for the day, went back to Chiang Mai, and once I was in Chiang Mai, I was like, wow, this was fucking, excuse my language, this was so awesome. I left to now try a manual, and in Thailand they call these step-throughs with a semi-automatic gearbox a manual. So I hired a Honda Dream 100 or 110 and just went exploring. And by day 3, I went up to Doi Inthanon. It's just the tallest mountain in Thailand at 2,500 meters above sea level. And from there on, kind of like it just slowed down with riding bikes. I always wanted to ride them, and I'm sorry if I'm going kind of like too far ahead already.
No, it's great. This is perfect.
What happened from there on was I moved to Australia, did the camper van thing where I lived in a camper van for 2 years, which also happened by accident. But in that time, I kind of gotten into Top Gear a lot, and one thing that stuck with me was the Vietnam special.
Yeah.
And
I think if you sorry to interrupt, but I think if you haven't seen the Top Gear Vietnam special, stop watching this, go watch that, and then come back and resume at this point, because that's such a quintessential adventure on small bikes. I think most of New Zealand motorcycle enthusiasts will have seen that, and you know, same with Australia, same with the UK, the US maybe. But it was a huge part of growing up. You know, every week there'd be a new Top Gear episode on. I'm a few years younger than you, so you know, after high school, you'd you know, going to high school on a Monday, you'd always chat about it, and that video has played a big part of my life as well. And so much so that, you know, once a year, or once every 18 months or so, there's a few of us, I'll flick a message around like, who wants to watch, we're all in different locations, who wants to watch Top Gear Vietnam all at the same time? And so we send each other a link, we have a group chat on Facebook, and we all hit play at the same time and just chat to each other while we're watching it. Like, that's how much we enjoyed, and that was my first foray into the world of small bikes. So you saw that while you were in Australia, and that kind of reignited that bike passion, I'm guessing?
So it ignited the idea of, I want to go and travel across an entire country on like a motorbike, because it looked like these guys had so much fun doing that. These places that they've gone to, they were just mind-blowingly pretty, like the Hai Van Pass. And after having tried it in Thailand, I was like, I can do this. This is something I could do. This is quirky, and this looks like it's just a huge amount of fun. So I met a friend along the way, or kind of like became good friends with someone who also owned another camper van, and had a partner at the time as well. And us three, we kind of like kept things like, hey, you know what? When my visa expires in Australia, we should do this Vietnam special. We should do something similar. And I've tried Thailand before, so that kind of would be a good launch spot, because I've got a friend there, and it seems like a friendly enough country. So we kind of replicated that. We all met up in Bangkok. At some date, we just picked one date, all flew in, met up in a guest house, kind of organized ourselves, walked around the city, booked the overnight train, because the guys in Top Gear also took an overnight train. I was like, yeah, that's looked like fun, let's just do it, because why not? Went to Chiang Mai. First, we hired some bikes, just to see kind of, can we even do that? Because two of us never rode motorbikes before. Okay. Once we realized, like, hey, you know what? We can do this. This works fine. My friend, he actually made one good observation, and I recommend anybody who wants to replicate that too. And that was, none of us had licenses at the time. So he suggested we should get a license, because just in case anything goes wrong, our travel insurance will pay. It won't pay if you've done something illegal. So we kind of organized all the paperwork in Thailand to get a proper Thai motorbike license. We actually rocked up on our hire bikes at the licensing center to get tested, which is something you can't do everywhere else. No. And yeah, we did our licenses. Then we just went to a place, bought motorbikes, because it's a bit more difficult if you rock up on a hire bike that doesn't belong to you, and you want to explain to the border official that you're allowed to do that. Yes. So we hired a couple. We bought a couple motorbikes, tested them out. They were all of like 3 different grades. They were all step throughs, like a Honda Dream.
And these are all old bikes, right? Like not brand new ones. It's not the Honda Wave behind you, was it?
No, it wasn't this one.
No.
They were all used. I mean, I had a Wave 110. It was 1 year old. That cost me about $1,000 Australian at the time in 2012.
Okay.
So we got these bikes, and then we first went across Thailand, and then my friend split away from us, and we just me and my partner at the time, we then traveled all the way through Vietnam. We somehow managed to get into the country and back to Thailand.
With your bikes?
With our bikes, yes.
That's wild, because that's a thing that's not possible and not allowed. Even so much so that in 2011, Ed March, when he went from Malaysia into Thailand, and then he was going to go across the border into Vietnam, it wasn't possible. He left his bike behind, rented another bike while he was there, or bought another bike and did the country, and then left again. And I know people that have done the opposite. I know for a fact that you can rent a bike in Vietnam and go over the border into Cambodia and come back again because it's a Vietnamese bike. But the opposite way, did you pay someone some cash?
So
what happened?
We tried to. We tried to pay somebody, but they wouldn't let us. Everybody thinks Vietnam is really corrupt and the police just gobble up money. They don't. I had the fortune of traveling with this beautiful German woman, and maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know.
Possibly.
But it wasn't easy. We actually just waited out the patience of the guys at the border, because we only had a one-way visa, and we just looked very, very sad. And we sat there for 3 or 4 hours, and eventually the guy let us through and let us go through the country with no paperwork. So once we were in the country, we were like, "Yay, great, we're legal, we've done it." Our bikes are not. Oh no.
Yeah.
So let's hope we're not going to get caught by the police, which I did then twice for speeding. Luckily, they let us keep going because we're foreigners. But that was essentially how we managed to get in. It was through a lot of luck. I'm not sure you can succeed with that tactic, because a lot of people have tried.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. There's a lot of people that have tried, and unless you've got a beautiful German woman with you, give it a go. If you don't bother. Even then, if you do, it's likely going to end up bad for you. So you bought these bikes in Chiang Mai. You eventually got into Vietnam. How long did you spend on these bikes before you parted ways with them?
We've traveled with them for 6 months total.
Okay.
We've been slow. We took our time. We had a month in something in Thailand, 2 months in Vietnam, a month in Cambodia, a few weeks in Laos, and then we had another 3 weeks in Thailand or something like that. It's more than 10 years ago, unfortunately now. But we sold them after that, and we sold them at pretty much the same money we bought them for, because they were used. They depreciate very quickly initially, and then they don't lose much value, and they're not even expensive to buy new anyway. That's why I've gone and presented at Horizons Unlimited event at one point. And
wow, amazing!
I told at the event, if you want to get into travel on motorbikes, Thailand is the place to do it, because it's so cheap, it's so easy, you don't need much, and it doesn't cost much. I think the total trip cost us something like $6,000 Australian at the time.
Yeah.
And that's with accommodation and even doing dive excursions and stuff like that.
That's crazy. Yeah. But it is cost effective, and I try to get that point across to people. Excuse me. I may edit that out, I may not. I've discovered that with a lot of Kiwis, trying to convince them to come across and do these kind of bike adventures, that people just think expensive and then put it out of their head. They don't actually want to sit there and evaluate. And the way I budget for my trips is I really don't. And a lot of people say to me, "Oh man, how do you travel? And you do this and you do that, and you must earn a lot of money." And it's no, it's just my priorities are a lot different than other people. I don't own a house. So I mean,
welcome to the club.
all of my efforts would go towards that. And so my method is always buying a ticket to the country I want to go to quite far ahead. I always plan that part, that I'm going to go there, and then basically between the day I buy the ticket and the day I leave, I have to save some money because I'm going. So that's my method. I mean, did you plan for this kind of?
I plan just for the most basic things. I mean, I'm planning going around the world, and I'm going to approach it in a similar kind of manner of what are the basic essentials I need? I need insurance. I need this and this paperwork to leave the country and make my way back again. And just have some money on my Visa card or whatever card you've got, have some cash, and that's the main items I plan ahead for. Other than that, like, these countries are so cheap. One thing I also see, and that's what I kind of had with Thailand as well, is I was completely green, and I assume lots of people just have the fear of like, oh my God, what if something happens to me? What if I get ripped off? This place is so easy. It's actually kind of like, once you start traveling, you discover like most places aren't as scary as you think they are.
Exactly. And you do get ripped off, but you don't realize till later on. And the tune of money that you get ripped off, like not regularly, but, you know, on every trip, I've had a point where I look back and I'm like, I probably paid $3 extra than I should have for that particular thing. But that's what ripped off constitutes as. And so, exactly. And you just have some people that believe that, hey, you know, I get it for people that live there and have a work permit and, you know, Thailand's their home. They don't want to be overpaying for stuff because they understand it. But, you know, when you're on holiday and that same thing would cost a dramatic amount back home. I mean, one thing that stands out to me on our Malaysia to Thailand trip was when we were riding over this massive bridge from over to Georgetown into Penang. It's a 24-kilometre bridge. It took us like 40 minutes to cross. We stopped in the middle and took photos. By the time we got off the other side, our friend's bike, one of the bikes, kept stalling in traffic. And we're like, this is weird. You know, it's a semi-automatic, it just kept cutting out. And by the time we got to the accommodation, we took all the plastics off and the carb had only one bolt holding it on. The other had completely gone and it was kind of on an angle. And so it was a surprise it had been running at all. And now in New Zealand, that would mean you're off your bike for a solid week. You've got to book in time with a bike shop. You've got to wait, turn up, pay a ridiculous amount. Not a ridiculous amount necessarily, but like even the waiting is just hard. Even if it only takes them an hour's worth of labour, which you know is probably fair for the job.
Try getting an appointment slot with a genuine Toyota dealership. It's always minimum 2 to 3 weeks.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then we had discovered this issue at 5-6 p.m. in the evening, and we were like, oh, that's it. You know, a whole day's ruined. The next day, we're not going to be able to do anything. And the guy at the reception of the guest house is like, what are you talking about? Just go down there to Triple J Motors or whatever it was on the side of the road in Penang, and the guy just whipped it up and sorted it out for $15 like right then and there. And I think a lot of people have a Western approach to thinking about the problems that will come up. Oh, if this problem comes up, this is what would happen in my country, so this is what will happen there, and it's just not the case.
I mean, we had to do engine rebuilds in Thailand because we bought like old bikes and this piston rings went, and like out here that's just kind of like, yeah, you're done. Over there in Thailand, I've done 2 now. It was $150 to get complete. I think they replaced the jug and put a new piston in with a new rings, and they're done in like 3 days. And while you're there, it's like, okay, cool. You just don't have any plans of like, if you don't have a schedule that's fixed, it becomes so easy to just stay there for a couple of days more, just like explore the local area. If you come on multiple motorbikes, you just kind of go and explore. With the ripping off, actually, it really depends on where you are as well. I found like mostly northern Thailand, they almost get insulted if you doubt them. That kind of the price that they give you is the same one as the locals pay. I've rarely ever been ripped off. The only thing which kind of like does happen is if you buy used motorbikes from Thai people, especially from Thai dealerships, they're always dodgy. But I've had the exact same experience in Australia as well. Like if you buy a second-hand vehicle, I've never had like one that just worked where kind of the previous owner hasn't hidden something from me. So if you go up with that attitude of like, hey, you know what, I might just buy a bit of a lemon, but at least it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg to fix it up. I mean, it cost us less to do a major engine job on a motorbike in Thailand than it does cost to just do a basic service here in Australia.
And I also discovered that you can waste time going around looking for a perfect motorbike, but what you'll find is that perfect motorbike likely isn't perfect. It's just been made to look perfect. So it's almost better to get one that's a bit weathered and it's like an accurate representation. We were buying, I bought a 1998 Honda Wave that had 2,000 kilometers on the speedo, which is not the case.
102,000 probably.
I'd say more because in Malaysia the ability to buy aftermarket plastics is much the same as Thailand. Aftermarket speedometers, they just slap new ones in. They don't really bother winding it over or anything. They'll just chuck a new one in, and that's how it is. And we thought we had the best. We went around 5-6 shops, got the cleanest bikes we could find. And when we were taking them apart in Bangkok, because we sent some of the parts home, you'd see overspray from black paint on the different parts that they didn't uncover. I thought my gearbox had broken at one point. It turns out my front sprocket was missing half a tooth. So little things like that were all fixable along the way, and I was just not super brave to check them out. Did you have any kind of mechanical skills or anything? These days I imagine you've picked some up, whether you had it or not, because I've done
a full engine rebuild on this now because I'm living in Australia. When I first came to Thailand, I actually didn't even know how to change a tire. I knew how to do it on a bicycle, but once I've done my first tire change on a motorbike, I've realized how unskilled I was, that I would have been completely lost. No, I had no skills. That's why I'm saying that place is just so easy. You don't need anything. All you need is whatever clothes you want to wear on the trip, and what the stuff you want to take with you. Take as little as you need. You don't need that much. Just bring a jumper. It gets cold in the mountains. They're higher than you think they are.
Yes.
But that's all you need. If you get one of these small bikes, you will find someone who can fix them up in every little village. I had punctures somewhere in the countryside, up in Laos, up somewhere in the mountains, and just every 15 hours or so you drive past, there will be those fancy donuts hanging around. You'll find somebody who can fix them up. If you come on a KTM or a BMW, then you might have problems. But if you come on these, you don't need to know anything. And they'll sort you out. They'll help you out. If you get stranded, eventually someone will come past who will organize a tire man to come for you, and they'll sort you out then.
It's very interesting. It's so true as well. And the times we did work on our own bikes on the trip, we'd have locals coming up to us and being like, "Oh, are you mechanics?" And no, we just are trying to fix our bike. And now they're so confused. Well, why don't you take it to a bike shop? They're cheap. What are you even bothering for? And that's the attitude of the locals over there, especially the ones that aren't using motorcycles as a form of pleasure. It's just, a way to get around. It's just, it just is what it is. So you had those bikes for 6 months. You sold them off. Did you stay in Thailand at that point? Where does this bike come into it?
So that's where my travel in Thailand ended. Things went a little bit strange. I went back to Australia, then to Europe, and in Europe, that relationship fell apart. And I didn't like living in Europe at the time. I still don't. That's why I'm living here. I like the warmth. I don't cope well with the cold.
Is it just weather, or is it
it's the weather and
geopolitical
the
situations?
The attitude as well. People are just very, very friendly there. And so at some point I decided, hey, you know what? I wanted to actually go back to Australia. I couldn't because the visas are very difficult. So I decided I want to live in Thailand. I loved it there. I loved Chiang Mai. So I flew over there with no return flight. I got a student visa, so I could stay there for a full year. And as I stayed there, I was like, okay, cool. I discovered Ed March at the time. I was like, the stuff that he's done looked really fun. Same Top Gear inspiration.
Yeah.
What he's done looks really fun. At some point in my life, I want to do something similar, but I want to have a bike that will enable me to do that. I'm going to enjoy to use on this. Now that I've saved up a little bit and I'm going to use it for a longer time, and because of our experience of used bikes, I'm going to spend the money and just buy a new one. I'm going to buy the most suitable bike I can find. And I loved the Wave 125 because it's like the bikes that I had before, but everything is a little bit better on them. It's got a bigger fuel tank. It's got a disc brake. Because I considered hey, I could take a postie bike from Australia, but they're really short wheelbase. They've got old-fashioned bottle cap drum brakes on the front and the rear. They're still carbureted, and I have a very big dislike for carburetors. This thing, turnkey, fire up, two turns. Once it's running, it just runs. There's a whole bunch of things about these. So I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to get one of those. I can get them fixed up anywhere in the world. They have got them in. They have them in Europe as the Innova. Yes, there's some differences, but at least I'll find some parts. They've got them in the Middle East. They've got them in Latin America. Everywhere I go, I will be able to find parts. That's what I'm going to buy. So I actually went to the same Dodge dealership. I bought the used bike for my first trip through Vietnam. I went there and was like, I want to buy a brand new one. This is the bike I want in white. electric start place. They also make them as non-e-start. I didn't realize that, but so I bought the bike over there. It took me a while to kind of like really fall in love with it, but it just grew on me more and more. And
they're big, like they're big. Okay, this is going to sound funny to anyone watching, but if you've come from riding 100cc underbone Honda in Southeast Asia, and then you jump on those, they're way wider. You're much higher off the ground than you expect. The underseat storage, I think it's 18 litres. You can put a full face helmet under there. And it's just, they're a lot girthier than you would expect. And that was my initial, my first Honda Wave 125 was the one I bought online before I'd even ridden one. I just knew that I wanted one. I was in Thailand looking at them in dealerships. One came up for sale in New Zealand, so I ended up picking that one up. And yeah, getting on it kind of felt like it was like the first time if you've ever driven a van after being in cars for a long time, you're like, I'm really high up right now. And the other thing with these Honda Waves that I'd like to point out while we're talking about them is that for all the CT125 enthusiasts, the Honda Wave has a higher air intake at a better location than a CT125. And I've proven that several times. The air intake right there behind the front basket up the top.
Yeah, it's in there.
Yes, yeah, and that's higher than the rear rack of a CT125. So people go out and spend, in New Zealand, it's $7,500 New Zealand for a CT125. The Honda Waves aren't available because they don't have ABS. But if they were, I tell everyone, check a set of knobbly tires on those bikes, and they are literally the world's best adventure bike. My biased opinion.
The thing that you can also do with them, which is kind of compared to all of the other step-throughs that Honda do, and like I call it like the Super Cup of Super Cups, essentially, because it's essentially just an evolution of the Super Cup. It can haul more stuff than any of them, because you've got a full passenger seat that you can like throw stuff on. You've got the basket in the front, which you don't have on either I think the C125 has a basket, maybe? No, it doesn't have a basket in the front. Oh,
maybe. It doesn't in stock, not at all, no.
Don't know. It's got a basket, and unlike the older cups, like the C90, it's actually on the frame, so it doesn't upset your handlebars if it's loaded up. You've got like the big passenger seat, the big storage bin behind, or under your seat. You've got the space in front of you, and you can like strap on a luggage rack in the rear as well, so you can hold much more than with any of the other bikes.
One secret life hack for the Honda Wave that I haven't done, and I've tried to do 2 times without success now, both places I went to didn't have them, is Malaysia. Basically, the law in Malaysia, it's not official law, but I'm convinced that it might as well be, is if you don't have a knee basket, so that's the ones that are right in front of your knees and come off around the ignition, they put those on the bikes. And I've always wanted my front basket, a knee basket, and then also they do a real nice Honda Wave 125 purpose-built top box mount for the rear. And if I had all of those things, because you run a pannier setup, well, you did for a while, didn't you?
I still do, actually. You just can't see it in the video, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Are they just Velcroed over top of the seat and under the seat, or?
Initially.
Yes.
It all evolved. So I originally just had like the luggage rack that came on it, and luggage racks on motorbikes are a weird thing because they're always weak ass. On my CB500X, the stock luggage rack is only rated for 6 kilograms. The top box weighs 5. And it's a genuine GV box as well.
Yeah.
Or a GV rack. The Wave rack was, I think, rated for like 15 or 20 kilos. I don't remember. And I managed to bend that as well, because that's just what you do in Southeast Asia. You just overload the crap out of them. So at some point, I went to get it reinforced after it drooped down. And I just kept building onto the bike. In Thailand, I first kind of got my local Thai mechanic for like, I can't believe it was something like $40 or so. He custom welded up like a little rack where I could put panniers on it. But when I came to Australia, I just redid everything myself. I learned to weld here just because it's so much more expensive. And I just bought some I just picked up some old chairs from the side of the road whenever they've got curbside collection up here to get me some nice pre-bent piping. And eventually I made myself my own luggage rack that just kind of like goes all around, and just put on the bags on top of they just go under the seat now. So you've got to push it down a bit. Yeah. That's how they sit now, and that's pretty much permanent on a bike.
That's awesome. And those I've done 13,000 kilometers. That's it. on my Honda Wave. I've rebuilt the engine into 143, and that's obviously a bit of a ridiculous process now where I need to get it to a point where it's actually going to be reliable. It mostly is. Oil cooler seems to be successful. Biggest issue is that my cam chain tension and rollers are chewing themselves apart with the higher horsepower, which I expected, so now I need to put in like a reinforced one. You can either get metal kind of ones, or you can get like a neoprene, like reinforced plastic one. You've done nearly 100,000 kilometers. Like, let's round it up.
It's 94,000 legit kilometers on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how many kilometers had it had in Thailand before you moved it to Australia?
So in Thailand, it's done 40,000 kilometers. I've crisscrossed the country, and I've done like 2 trips when I lived there. Two actually like full the entire length of Laos. 2 laps around Cambodia. It's just whenever I had a chance when you lived there, kind of because it is so cheap, you could just kind of like hop on your bike and just go and explore.
Yeah.
So 40,000 it did in Thailand, and then I shipped it to Australia when I moved here. And
there's a loophole that you
Sorry?
There's a loophole I was going to say there's a loophole that you actually got it into Australia, because if I lived in Australia, which I can as a Kiwi, and I was like, I'm going to import a bike from Asia, it just doesn't work like that.
You could import a bike from New Zealand. So the loophole is, because I've been asked by a few people, that loophole is that if you lived abroad in another country, the Australian government allows you to import a personal vehicle. There's a special option for imports for vehicles. And that is just to make it a bit easier for kind of like letting you kind of like bring your belongings with you, and you can bring one vehicle once every 5 years into the country, where you're exempt from a whole bunch of red tape and regulations. So you don't have to do the full, in Australia, Australian design regulations test, where you have to go to an engineer and they have to test and make sure that like everything is up to Australian spec. There it's just the basic necessities that it is road legal. So like it's got working lights, it's got working indicators and all that. So because I lived in Thailand for 2 years and I could prove that I owned it for 2 years, I could get that special import permit, and then I could bring it in. It's still not cheap. I think it cost me about $2,000 to bring the bike in. So it's not cheap. But considering how much step-throughs cost in Australia, and now you can't get them anywhere anyway.
No.
It actually kind of like worked out well for me. So that's essentially how I got the bike in.
So you've done another 40,000 kilometers.
53,000 since then. Yeah. That's for some people it's just the whole life of a motorbike, and I've done that in 6 years. Yeah,
that's crazy. Yeah,
it's and if you keep the engine stock, so long as you don't modify it and you kind of like make sure you kind of keep on top of the oil, that's what kills them. Is they've got a pretty shallow sump, and the oil pickup is quite far in the front. So this engine is the same as you've got on a Grom as well, and Grom engines tend to die a lot because people do wheelies, and as soon as you kind of like pop up, oil intake is in the front. There's no oil going through your engine. So long as you kind of like keep on top of that, these can last a long time. I wasn't that nice with the engine. I've been doing like long revs, long days, doing some mad off-roading in Thailand. I mean, you've seen the picture of me jumping it up in the local mountains around here.
Yeah.
So it lasted till 80,000 kilometers before one of the bearings on the inside of the engine went. It's the one that goes into the gearbox input shaft. Yep. It just sits on the clutch, and I could just hear it kind of like go clunk, 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 clunk. But it lasted 20,000 kilometers before it went wrong. I'm not sure what it is with Honda and Toyota cars. In my experience, they've always done the same thing, that if something goes wrong, they tend to give you plenty of notice, that you can always make your way home or somewhere, and they will keep going for a while. Unlike some makes, like, let's say, I'm not going to say too much, I don't want to upset anybody. Maybe put something in the comments. Where they just explode on you. I've had friends, they've had like certain kind of like vans that they love a lot. They're made by not Toyota or Honda. And they drive, catastrophic engine damage. With this, that knocking started at 60,000 kilometers when I've changed the cam chain tensioner for the first time. that's when it started knocking, and I wonder if it was because it was sitting at a funny position, maybe some like debris went into the bearing, I don't know. It started knocking, and it lasted me for like, let's say 17,000 kilometers, and at some point my gear shifter started to kind of like shake. And I've still done one more trip.
Yeah.
And on the way back, kind of like it started to knock really, really loud, and the knocking wouldn't go away. And it's like, yeah, something's falling apart inside that engine. I need to fix it. And I've still done like a last blast at like 100 and something kilometers an hour on the motorway coming down to Brisbane before I switched it off for the last time and I did the rebuild.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I've always had the philosophy, and I'm sure a lot of other people agree with Honda. They make engines, or every single motorcycle they make is capable of a lot more power than it's putting out. It's almost like they make something that's capable of this, detune it down to here, it'll last forever. Job done. And that seems to be their philosophy.
There are the two engineering terms that I've picked up quite late in life, and like they're kind of often misunderstood. They tend to be under-engineered and overbuilt. And under-engineered means kind of, because everybody goes like, oh, they're over-engineered. No. Engineering means to just bolt stuff on and add complications to it. These are actually relatively simple. That engine kind of like, it's not that much more complicated than some lawnmowers. It's pretty old school and old-fashioned. That's why you see so many clones of them, because there's almost no patents you can kind of like grab onto anymore, because they're just so basic internally. That is they're very, very simple, which makes them easy to repair, and there's less to break as well, because there's less moving parts. But they overbuild them, so every component that is in there is bigger than it needs to be, just to give it that extra reliability.
For sure. It's honestly been inspiring just watching your motorcycle journeys. Obviously, it's not the only bike you own. I noticed in the photo you sent me of the setup, because we were comparing setups, but, you know, as men do, they compare things. And I noticed there's a Honda Monkey behind you.
That is a monkey, yes.
I didn't know that. You've been keeping that secret. Why is it there?
So that belongs to my partner. She's actually, I met her when I lived in Thailand. She's a wonderful American woman. And whole story, you meet the nicest people in Honda, and like the motorbikes connect. I actually met her because I loved touring around in the local area. Like every weekend I would just go out, and I would go to a place called Farang Farm, also a foreigner farm translated, where there was like a French bakery, and like all the foreigners would go there to kind of like get their fix on pastries and Western food after living in Thailand. And I just met someone there, and they asked me, like, oh, what do you do? I was like, oh yeah, I travel around the local areas. And eventually I started a little group called the Iron Bums, Chiang Mai Weekend Riders, where we would just kind of like go and explore. And there was this kind of like girl, she kind of like joined in as well. Like, oh, this is kind of fun. She arrived on like a Honda Gelato or something like that, or Suzuki Gelato. It's like a scooter that looked like an ice cream cone almost. And so she joined in, and she kind of like also kind of like got a fix for kind of like, hey, this is kind of like nice exploring on these local areas. And so she wanted to buy herself her own bike at some point, and I recommended a Honda Wave. And the reason why she rides a Monkey is it's because she's not the tallest person, and these bikes are one of the very few that kind of like are actually suitable for short riders.
It's true. And I just released yesterday a video of the founder of the guy who basically created the Honda Trail Cub, and I edited a little bit of it out because he gets quite ranty about it. But he hates that all motorcycle manufacturers like have such high seat heights on everything these days. His personal opinion, one thing he said that was really interesting, he said Honda don't even realize this is a guy in his 90s. He's ridden bikes all around the world, done the International 6 days on his own custom built Sachs motorcycle. He'd done so much, and he said Honda have the Honda Rebel. The Honda Rebel has the low seat height. It comes out in a 500 and 1100, or I think you can get a 300 in some countries. Yeah, and that bike there, if it had spoked wheels and some suspension travel, you could take that thing absolutely anywhere. Anyone could take that thing anywhere, is what he's saying.
I bet the Suzuki TU250X would be an awesome overland tourer. It's got big spoked wheels. It's got big sidewalls on tires. That's what I've become a big advocate for. Get tires with rubber on them. because that helps you with the bumps and with grip. Just deflate them a little bit, and now the whole tire just grabs around stuff. These bikes also have one thing which a lot of bigger motorbikes don't have, and that is that they're light on the top. Like the engine kind of like, it doesn't move up, it moves forward. The fuel tank's under the seat. I mean, on these kind of like, you've got a fuel tank on top, but it's still quite low. I've got a CB500X, and if you look at like on top 10 lists, or just go on Google, kind of like, hey, motorbike for short riders, that thing is always in the lists. It's a terrible motorcycle for short riders. My girlfriend, she can't reach her feet down when she sits on it. It's that tall, but it's also top heavy, and that's even like more difficult for women who just don't have as much upper body strength. Yeah. I struggle to pick that thing up once it falls over. If it actually goes beyond a certain angle, that thing just tips over. These bikes, they're so light high up because they just don't carry anything up high. If it falls over, you just go, oh yeah, cool. I mean, the joke that I make, kind of, because they're cheap as well, so you don't worry about them if you do scratch them up, is if you drop like a big, I don't want to joke too much about the GS because its weight distribution is good. If you drop like a big adventure bike, usually you kind of like, you go panic, and now you have to like do the special technique that doesn't work if it's
lifting up backwards.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, good luck doing that if it's muddy underneath you. I once dropped the 500 in like a greasy spot, and I could not pick it up. I had to wait for help. With these things, what happens is, number one is you have a laugh because you just had like this kind of like weird experience or fun experience. Then you take a picture, and then you pick it up.
Yeah. And none of those are difficult things. Yeah, I completely understand. And I've ridden a lot of off-road on my Honda Wave. It was an exclusive adventure bike for a long time. I had knobbly tyres on the front and the rear. And we go up over, there's an ex-World Rally Championship stage. You know, it was in the 90s. It was one of the most aggressive stages in New Zealand. They don't use it anymore, but it's called the Motu Road. And I've done a few videos on it. And we would go absolutely ham up this mountain. It's over like 2 or 3 mountains, basically. It's a 45-kilometer road one way. You know, at the entrance it says 4-wheel drives only. Don't go up this road. it's that kind of road.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, exactly. And I've always done that road with people who can ride a lot better than me. They can ride a lot faster than me, but my bike's always been a bit faster. So the Honda Wave's capable. And so inevitably what I would find is I'd get myself into silly situations, because I'm sure you'll know, if you've done a lot of group riding, you end up fixating on the person in front of you, and if they can outride you, you end up getting into silly situations. But every single time, you know, I'm leaning over a bit too far, I just put my foot down and kind of kick myself back up again at 30 kilometers an hour, and you just keep going. And if it does fall over, like you say, it's not a big deal.
It's actually kind of like plays along one of the things that I love with the Wave in particular, and with these ones. They're extremely stable. They're both, because they're so light, they're super flickable, but like compared with something like a Vespa, where you sit like really high up, and it's not even I looked at the specs, that it should be the same, but like I find them extremely twitchy, and they just don't sit straight. My girlfriend, when she rode on her Wave 125X in Thailand with me sitting in the back, and she's much smaller than me, she once just dropped off a section where they kind of like went into construction zone. That thing just rights itself. They're really stable, and because they're so light, you can just catch yourself and pick them up.
I completely agree. When I put heated grips on mine, I would push the heated grip on the right-hand side right up hard against the plastics. So basically you had cruise control. And on long rides, on long straights, you just twist it back as far as you want, push that grip in so it stays there. And you can almost Titanic down the road, you know. It's good fun.
I do entire mountainsides kind of like going downhill, where you've got gravity to push you, and you can just use your legs to just kind of like go downhill, kind of like, hey, look, Mum, no hands.
Yeah, exactly. I completely understand. A couple of questions for you, because we'll try to wrap it up soon. I don't want to take too much of your time. You've done a lot of bike stuff. You've got a big bike. You're planning an around the world trip. So we'll finish it with the chat about the the world trip. But just what's 2 questions? Your most memorable moment on a small bike? You have to pick one. I want to know what your most memorable moment on a small bike would be. And the most terrible moment, the absolute most atrocious moment where you're like, heck, I wish this day would end. I
think that
it could have...
both of them would be actually possibly the same day. That was with my friend Ashley, who I've done the big Vietnam trip with. We bought I bought him another wave like that, the same, just in blue. And we went to kind of go through Cambodia in 2015. And what I was actually supposed to kind of finish up the kind of like leg with him, where we would just both end up in Siem Reap, where you've got the beautiful temples of Angkor Wat. And my partner, Lane, she would then fly in the next day. And we decided, in our infinite wisdom, to take on a road called Road 66. And it was like a dirt road. So we had like one of the Gold Triangle maps, I think it's called, to kind of like go and cut across, kind of like go into Siem Reap from somewhere in the east of the country. And it was one of the most difficult roads imaginable. Just one of the entrances, I think I've sent you a picture, I can send it to you. We just went like these bog pits and kind of like went, somehow at some point we managed to get through after like 25 minutes or so, just for like one small thing, where even like the locals, they were just like taking off their shoes. They actually came up in like nice outfits, but they just kind of like pushed their bikes through. I would not have been able to do it on the 500. Absolutely no chance.
Yeah.
Kind of like came through, tried to find the road. We kept going. At some point, we followed the road on Google Maps and on my OpenStreetMap, where it just like started to turn into just grass, and you just rode on like nothing, or like it just doesn't go anywhere. It just turned back. We found a village, and I was like, aha, there's going to be a school, and in the school they're going to have people who speak English. They'll be able to tell us like if this road actually kind of like goes out anywhere, and if they can give us some tips. We found some school teachers. And they did kind of like invite us for lunch, and they were kind of like lovely, and they told us like, oh yeah, the road does continue, it's fine, it's going to be okay. You've passed the worst, that bog pit you've gone through, that's the worst, you're going to be okay. Wonderful. And they even escorted us out, so I think the local villages, they actually kind of like built like a bypass for the main road, because I think the main road is no longer passable. So they escorted us out back onto like where it joins together with what is on Google Maps and OpenStreetView. And we just kept going, and there were some bog pits in between, but nothing too bad, until at some point we came towards what looked like a lake. And I actually told my friend Ashley, it's like, hey, there's a river crossing. I hope it's going to be fine. Like, it looks quite big on the map, but like, hopefully it's going to be all right. We arrived there, and just the road just ends, and you're just looking at essentially not a lake, but like at a big pond, and you can't even see where the road heads out because it actually curves out. I'm like, wow, this is just. Do we have to like turn all the way back? It was like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock almost in the afternoon. It was quite late by then. Like, well, let's hope this. I don't know. What should we do? And some local Cambodian boy just popped out of nowhere, just rocked up. We heard a chainsaw earlier. Just rocked up, and just through hands and feet, he kind of like explained to us, like, yeah, no, the road does go through there, but it's really deep. And we're like, okay, cool, let's just walk through it. So tried first to lift up our pants. No, this is beyond knee height. So we actually like had to take off our pants, just walking in underwear. It was
been a sight to behold.
It was until waist height. We're like, well, should we push the bikes through? I mean, they can do it. It's just like you flood all of your electrics and everything. Yeah. It's going to be fine. Possibly, but like in a month's time, like we're going to have like corrosion kicking in and like stuff. We're going to have electrical gremlins.
Yeah.
So walked back out again. We took off all the luggage, carried it through. The Cambodian guy, they just showed us like, hey, just put like this big stick, put it through the front wheel. 2 guys pick it up in the front, and one picks it up from the back. Like, okay, we don't have much of a choice. I have to pick up Lane from the airport tomorrow. So because I promised. Well, let's do that. So, yes, we kind of like carried the bikes through. I did record it on video of us just kind of like schlepping the first bike, then the second one, put everything together. We gave this poor guy a bit of money. You don't have to, but in that instance, like,
why not?
He's been helping us out so much. So we carried on. Like, yes, we've done it, oh my god, we've defeated this difficult road. And at some point, like, as evening was starting to set in and it was getting dark, Ashley hit a puncture.
Oh, great timing.
Wonderful timing. We still had like another like 2 hours to go to Siem Reap, and we're like, oh god, we're not going to make it. Like, all the as easy as you can find a repair shop, we were completely unprepared to fix punctures. Luckily, somehow, and rain started to kick in as well. We found a house that was under construction, and we're like, well, let's just go under there, put up our tents under there, and hopefully it's going to be okay, and people are not going to be too angry at us. If you did it in the US, I'm always worried if someone's going to come out with a gun and is going to kind of like chase us away. So we actually camped under this house, and the neighbors of that people, they kind of like saw us. They must have felt bad for us because they gifted us watermelon.
Oh, thank you.
And
how lovely.
And I had to then send like lots of apologetic messages to Lane. It's like, hey, I'm really, really sorry. We tried to make it on time to see Ria, but we've kind of like gotten stranded on this difficult road and actually hit a puncture at the end, and we just couldn't make it in any way. It was impossible. She was a bit upset, but she forgave us at the end.
Yeah, thankfully.
And yeah, so we kind of like got his tire fixed up, and we just met up like sometime in the afternoon.
So equally a horrifying situation that like turns out to have a logical solution. And I think that when you come into any issue in that kind of country, you know, you panic as much as you would. A local person will turn up and be like, "What? Why are these people stressed?" You know, there's an obvious solution, and they just always have one. So that's really amazing to hear that part of your story. But I think the biggest part of your story is what's to come. Yeah. You're planning an around the world adventure on your Honda Wave. Now,
yes.
A lot of people do their around the world adventures in different ways. There's a guy, Helmet Head, on YouTube at the moment who's rides a Honda Monkey. He's UK based. He's starting to do a trip all the way across Europe, possibly around the world. I'm not sure, but he's doing it in stages. So he's ridden from UK, gone through to, I think his bike's somewhere in France now, and then he goes back and then earns more money and then continues on his trip again. I talked to Kevin and Mike, which are two Swedish guys. One was on a CRF 250, the other was on a Honda Grom, and he went all the way around the world, and they did it like a proper way, as in shipping their bikes to countries that were out of the way. They flew their bikes to New Zealand, you know, so they could ride around New Zealand on their own bikes, which for most people, that's just, you know, not even in the realms of possibility because it's such an expensive thing to do. And they had an amazing time. They had one break in the middle for about 6 months where they went home and earned money and then continued on. Unfortunately, that trip got cut early because of COVID. They ended up having to leave halfway through South America. So that was a bit of a shame for them. What's your plan? You're starting in Australia. It's a good place to start. Are we doing a lap? How's it work?
So it's difficult because I want to kind of like sell everything that we've got, which is always terrifying if you do that, especially after the older you get, the more difficult it gets. So the plan at the moment is we've also got a camper van. I don't just do motorbike travel. I'm not that obsessed with bikes alone. For me, it's the seeing things. So what our plan at the moment is sell everything except the Wave and our high-ace camper van that we have. Do one last lap around Australia in the high-ace, go escorted with Lane. I'll ride it to Darwin. Drop the bike off in Darwin. Again, I haven't planned it in that much detail. From there, ship the bike to Asia, whatever makes the most sense. East Timor seems like a decent option. There are some shipping companies that deal with that. From there, kind of like keep going in the camper van, and then we're going to part ways. Kind of like what Rachel and Ed March did, where kind of like they split up and they met along the way in some places.
Yes,
Just because traveling long distance on a motorcycle is very, very challenging and not for everyone. Lane's not that interested in that. She likes to stay more in like a local place. So that's the idea of kind of like I'll then continue then myself. And the main plan at the moment is simply make my way somehow into Southeast Asia, and then depending on like the world situation, because things keep changing, somehow make my way to Europe. My original plan was actually kind of like go to Portugal and then turn west until I hit coastline in Vladivostok. For obvious reasons, Russia at the moment is not a very good option.
No.
That's only just recently happened. Iran was actually on my plate at some point as well. That doesn't seem like a very good option at the moment, as much as I'm
also Myanmar's out as well, which means that which is incredibly frustrating, because I mean, when Ed March, there's a reason Ed March started in Malaysia with his first trip, because there's so many islands to get there. If you start in say like East Timor or Bali, it's just island hopping with a bike, which is really frustrating if you're not a patient person and you don't have the perseverance. Riding long distance on motorcycles is equally, if not more, a mental challenge than it is a physical challenge. and just picking yourself up and keeping going when you get to those moments. You know, there's unfortunately a bit of a civil war happening in Myanmar, and you know that sucks because it was closed for a long time, and then it was open.
It's open, but you just can't get through the country at the moment. At one point, you can get all the way to India, and there is a tour guide. He organizes those trips, but yeah, even he says kind of like, don't go to India at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So yeah, I guess you're going to come across those hurdles when you come to them and figure it out along the way.
That's why I'm spontaneous with it too, and why I don't have like a fixed plan, because like these things keep changing. I've actually met with like another legend. His name is Bob Dibble. He rode a Honda CT110 around the world, and he may have the world record of riding the world's smallest sidecar around the world, because he had a sidecar on his CT, and he actually recommended me to just fly the bike out of Thailand, out of Bangkok to Kazakhstan, and then from Kazakhstan I can then take the Caspian Sea to make my way to Europe from there. I don't know. I'll see how it's going to be. I still have 11 months before I set off from this house, and then it's going to be another few months before I finish around the Australia trip, and then from there I'm going to be on the bike.
Awesome.
I don't know. I keep myself up to any chance. That's how I've like traveled always. When I first came
for anyone watching, Tom had also mentioned that he's open for difficult places to get his motorcycle to. He's open for meeting people there, borrowing other bikes, doing the country in a different way. You know, riding around the world is what it is. It's your own concept. So if anyone out there is in a country that's a little bit annoying to get to, please reach out to Tom. He's on Facebook, Tom on a Budget. But sorry, I was interrupting.
Good. I said, spontaneous. I don't know how I'm gonna do it all. When I first came to Australia, I had the idea of just like working in IT and just make my way up, just like find one job after another and just like do it prim and proper. I ended up not doing that at all. Buy a camper van and do 2 laps around the continent. So we'll see how it's going to turn out from there. I might
look. You're an interesting. Yeah, you might end up in Thailand. You might end up in Thailand and accidentally end up there for another couple of years again. You never know. Look, it's amazing. You've seen more of Australia than most Australians, and you continue to do adventures now as well. So if anyone is interested, please follow Tom on Facebook, Tom on a Budget. Are you going to consider filming any part of your trip to share updates at all?
I'm considering it. It's very time intense to do that. Which is why I haven't done it till now. I've got a nice camera and a microphone setup that works okay. Because it is so much work to do it, I'm better with photography. That's why I mostly have got like photo blogs on Facebook. I will try it, but I can't make any guarantees just because it is so time intense.
Yeah, one thing I can recommend these days, which I've noticed a lot, ever since DJI brought out their little portable mic system that has its own chargeable case, it comes with a plug with a USB-C plug and a lightning plug, so you can plug those into any Android or iPhone, and then you've actually got a decent microphone on a phone that has likely 4K capabilities or at least 1080p.
USB-C has been an absolute godsend. I've got a little DJI Mini 3 Pro, and the problem you've got with these bikes is the charging output you've got out of them is so limited, which is why I've converted to LEDs just to get as much light or as much electricity out of it as possible. And now, because you've got USB-C charging, I can now charge a laptop and a drone on my motorbike, which is just...
That's
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really, really cool. Look, I've got no doubt that we'll chat soon, and I hope we ride together sometime. Looks like we were going to try to see if my bike tour that I'm doing early next year would line up with your trip, but I think we're going to miss each other by a couple of months. So we're just going to have to make it happen somewhere else, man.
Possibly end of, what is it, 2024? Yeah, end of 2024. There's still some time to go until then. We'll see.
We'll see what happens. Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for your time. I'll stop recording now and we'll have a bit of a chat afterwards, eh?
Thank you so much. Yeah, let me just see.
Sweet, man. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Let me just stop that.
Cheers.